What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Other Guys on the Badlands Podcast Network. I am your host this week, Paul Kilgallen. Jake is out traveling the world again. I think he's in Europe this time for a friend's wedding. So we have a very, very special guest with us. This is a face some of you may have seen at the live event because he was there to support us. He was hanging out in the VIP area in the back most of the time. He also is a major contributor on the draft guide, which is coming out today, pretty much at the same time as this podcast. And he is a specialist in tight ends. And so he did all of our tight end coverage for the draft guide, in addition to helping out a little bit more and also being a part of the draft guide chat and just contributing with general football thoughts and general football knowledge. Really interesting guy, great backstory. Also has a podcast and a blog called Remember the Tight Ends, which is really, really good. And I suggest everybody going and checking out. So without further ado, Max Toscano, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. How you doing, man?
Yeah, man, pretty good. Thanks for having me. It's really been so fun to really contribute and organize my draft thoughts in an actual systematized way instead of the way I normally do it, which is just watching a bunch of players, having a bunch of thoughts, not writing anything down, and then just kind of watching the draft. So it's been really, it's been really interesting to kind of to create a little bit of a scouting regimen, get myself constantly thinking about certain sets of criteria that I need to put into a write up, which has changed my process a little bit and made me a little bit more thorough. So I think that that's been cool. And obviously, I mean, the guide chat's awesome. The the evals I get to read just in the system have really helped color my my watches of some other guys that are outside of the tight end position as well. Um, yeah, no. So I guess a little bit about me is I write that Substack. Remember the tight ends. It's still relatively new. I got it up and running in December, so it's only a few months old. But the draft has been really really good. I've gotten a lot of good stuff out there. I think just with the draft is a good pretext, and I think the draft is always such an interesting bellwether for for broader theoretical discussions about football, because it's really when all of the chefs go grocery shopping, right? And you get to see year after year how the ingredients change, and where I think that GMs and front offices are behind on where the ingredients need to change. You can tell that, like, the skill sets that are valued, there's a little bit of a lag in terms of, and this is, you really see this at the tight end position, but you see it everywhere now. Um, there's a little bit of a lag in terms of the skill sets that people like and where the game is heading, because I think that everybody values pass catching, pass rush, pass protection. Obviously, those things aren't going anywhere in importance, but I think that especially with the tight end position, and that's why I think the draft has been so fun for me as a creator, is that it's allowed me to inject all of that philosophical stuff about the tight end position, um, because, like, it's a position that the NFL has gotten most wrong in the draft, besides maybe kicker, because taking a kicker is a mistake. But it's been interesting.
So Max, we Badlands put out my mock today. They asked us to put mocks together over the course of the last couple weeks, and so I ran a simulation, and I think in part because of some of the conversations I had with you, I ended up taking two tight ends. I took Tyler Warren first, and then later on, I think in the fourth round, I took Mitchell Evans because he was still on the board, and I couldn't resist at that point. I also took a kicker in the seventh round because then, like it or not, the Jets lost 3 games as a result of a kicker last year. So probably a little bit of emotional scarring there, but I did go ahead and take it. Listen, I asked you to come on today because in a conversation that we were having in the draft guy chat, a week or two ago, you had a tweet of your own that you put in there. And you essentially just said, hey, this is really undervalued in the NFL. And so I'm just going to read the tweet out loud to people, and then we're going to see where this conversation goes from here. And you said, how important is the run in the modern NFL, and what advantage is created when you force teams to honor it? Prosumer Sports The only team in the top 5 in EPA per pass with a negative EPA per rush was Cincinnati. I know this is a topic close to your heart. The top 3 EPA per pass, Baltimore, Buffalo, Detroit, ranked 3rd, 2nd, and 7th in EPA per rush. So the basic framework here is that the importance of the pass and the rush are kind of interlocked, right? You can't have one with the other. And so you had kind of an interesting thesis about the NFL and how the NFL is getting this wrong. And so I'm going to give you some space to run here and kind of talk your shit.
Yeah, well, the NFL is getting this wrong, and I think that commentators are really getting it wrong too. But the reason that that's the case is because we had an era from about like late 2000s through to about 2020 where all of that was not true. Where your run and pass games kind of existed almost separate. Your run game, statistically speaking, when the analytics people in the 2010s were screaming from the rooftops that your run game did not matter and that you didn't need to run the ball well to use play action effectively. All of that stuff, all of it was true. It was all true. And the reason for this is that everybody played defense a certain way because of the Seahawks. So basically, and you know this as a Jets fan that had Saleh, who modernized a little bit on the back end in the last couple of years, but everybody just played cover 3 regardless most of the time. So NFL defensive coordinators, especially after the 90s and 2000s, which were so run heavy, especially the 90s and early 2000s, basically defense was ordered run first, just as a matter of philosophy. You needed to be gap sound against the run on first and second downs. You needed to have bodies in the box, and then on if you get into 3rd and long, you can start doing all the crazy stuff, right? You can start getting more multiple in coverage. You can keep 2 safeties deep, which opens up your coverage menu. You can do all that. And so that was the order of operations. And so what offenses figured out is that the main thing that offenses figured out that changed the game forever, both in college and especially in the NFL, is that passing is king. This became a passing league, and you look at the rates in which people run the ball and pass. It's pretty stark compared, from when I was very, very little in the early 2000s to now, especially in the end of the 2010s when people were like, if the greatest example of this, I think, is the Chiefs. They would go out with basically 4 wide receivers on the field with Travis Kelce and throw the ball all over the yard and just set teams on fire. And that changed. And it didn't just change because Tyreek Hill left. It changed before Tyreek Hill left. And what happened is the quote unquote too high revolution that everybody's talking about. So what defenses realized is that offenses figured out that they were going to honor the run no matter what, and they didn't have to present it. So they could essentially, and I this is kind of the term I use a lot, is offenses were able to eat candy for dinner. And they had no nutritional issues, they didn't gain any weight, they could eat candy for dinner and they were fine. That's over. So the paradigm that created our analytical understanding of offenses and defenses, but specifically offenses, is gone. The entire model shifts. And so where we're at now is a fundamental reimagination of value. It without necessarily getting rid of and discarding the sort of unavoidable truth that we discovered in the spread era, is that passing is king. And so I present the idea that teams need to commit resources on both sides of the ball to the run game, not because the run game is sacred or you need to quote unquote establish it no matter what the data says. It's because you can't pass without the run now.
So I think that's a really important point that you just made there, and I want to drill on that a little bit. I think a lot of people just say you need to establish the run because it's a trope.
Hmm.
And we've been saying it for as long as the NFL has existed, where no, you need to establish the run, like play action, all that stuff, right? And the same thing on defense. You need to respect the run, all that stuff. You need to be able to stop the run in order to earn the right to stop the pass, all that stuff. And so I think a lot of people have been saying it forever without kind of digging into what's happening underneath the covers in the way that you just did, which is explaining this journey that the NFL has taken where that was true. And then that actually wasn't true for a while. And now
Right.
it's true again as a result of that wave. Right. And so when people are on the outside looking in, and the new thing that's become popular to say about running backs is, oh, running backs are a dime a dozen, right? It's more important. And to some extent, like the actual running back position, you can make some cases there. It's more about the offensive line than it is about the running back. But now we're getting to this point where people are starting to value running backs again. Josh Jacobs proved it last year,
Hmm.
right? Some other guys proved it last year. They bet
Saquon.
on them. Saquon proved it, bet on himself and proved it. Whereas, and not that long ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, Le'Veon Bell bet on himself and he was wrong, right? And
Right.
so we have seen a shift that is currently happening. It just happened and it's just still in the process of happening. And I think that explanation of the kind of the back winding path there that was happening underneath the surface is an important distinction to make in this conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the resistance that people have to to valuing things like tight end blocking or edge rusher size is a big one. People love bendy, small, fast edge rushers because for years you can just kick them into a wide nine and let them get around the corner, and those were the guys that were producing your high volume pass rushing. And if you look at the tight end position, your guys like Jimmy Graham, your Travis Kelce's, your wide receiver types are the ones, because they are so good as pass catchers that they rival wide receivers. They are the ones that are able to generate the most volume and generate the most output. So what you could do is you could put them in situations that in an ecosystem in which the other unit is able to either stop the run or run the ball, you can't get away with. You could put Travis Kelsey at tight end with three other wide receivers on the field and get him these traditional tight end matchups, and he could cook in a way that they can't now. If you look at the Chiefs, their 12 personnel rate has risen sharply after Tyreek Hill left. Partially that's to replace Tyreek Hill, but it's kind of what teams did to them in the back half of that last year with Tyreek Hill, and we saw it in the Bengals game when the Bengals were coming out playing like dime, like a bunch, dropping eight, playing, super, super light boxes. And they had nowhere to go with the ball past like 5 yards. And so what running the ball does is it makes defenses, it's basically if I can put it in as simple of terms as possible, the dynamic between offenses and defenses now is sort of like a seesaw. And this is in an individual game. It's that the more static one of the units is, the less static the other. So, which one side, if one side is kept honest by the other unit, then they have to be basic and static. So, like if you're running the ball well and you need to commit bodies into the box, that what that does to the defense is it forces you to remove a defensive back from space and put him in the box, which destroys your coverage menu. It destroys it. Because if you need that safety, not just in the run fit, because you can run fit from depth, and that's what teams did to stop spread offenses from running the football. Is they all thought, okay, if teams are going to play too high, we can just conflict these guys with RPOs and stuff, and that's where defensive lines came in. Because what they started being able to do is they started reducing defensive linemen into interior gaps more and canceling those interior gaps and allowing the DBs to defend the perimeter where the ball has to bounce late. So an interior gap you can hit directly, but to get to the perimeter, it takes more time. So the defenders can come down late. And if you need that guy in the box, there are just so much less you can do in coverage, which makes things so much easier for the passing game and so much more dynamic and fluid. Whereas if you are in a situation where you can't run the ball and they're playing two safeties and they can do everything in coverage, then you're honest and you can't cheat. And you have to put like 5 options out there, 4 or 5 options, and have your quarterback go sort it out because you don't know what the coverage is, and the defense is going to be able to be specialized in what they can take away. That is not the case when they have to load the box. They are spread thin on the back end, and they are basic, honest, static, and attackable.
And when you're talking about coaches evolving, you mentioned Saleh kind of changing his strategy on the back end a little bit when he came over from San Francisco to the Jets, or it probably happened more. It's fairer to say it happened while he was in San Francisco post Seattle. So you're talking about coaches evolving, and I think that's why you've seen like an kind of an advent in these younger guys who are willing to kind of buck those trends a little bit and see what's happening underneath the surface, as opposed to falling back on kind of old footballisms about what has always worked. Andy Reid has always famously been good at kind of being a step ahead with that stuff. He goes and watches, 7-on-7 games in Texas to like figure out offensive plays to find out. And the other, like the tweet that we're referencing here as kind of the thesis statement for this pod, the interesting thing about the table that you put in this tweet is that all the teams that are on both of these top 10 lists for EPA per rush or pass, the ones that are on both lists are all in the playoffs. The ones that are on only one list, none of them are in the playoffs, with the exception of the Kansas City Chiefs. So, I think that's, it's, there's something to be said there about how the Chiefs have moved with it, even when their pass has struggled a little bit. I think famously the Chiefs had a really poor wide receiving crew last year. Mm-hmm. But kind of coloring all this in mind, like with where the NFL is headed, how do you think about this going into the draft? And how could you, as kind of a forward thinking team, kind of like stay ahead of this curve? And what would be your MO trying to head into this draft, whether it be specifically at the tight end position or somewhere else?
Well, it's the same everywhere. I think outside receiver and at corner, the paradigm will never change generally. Now, that's not to say the positions won't change, but I don't think you are going to ever need serious run game contributions from your 2 outside receivers or your corners. Those are your pure perimeter guys. But everybody inside those 2 alleys on the everybody inside the sidelines basically is different now. The edge rushers that you could put in any system, like you could put small, fast guys in any system. You could put them in 4 down, which for years was crazy. Like you look at the difference between, at least historically, between a 3-4 outside linebacker and a 4-3 defensive end. These are fundamentally different players, and that stopped being the case forever. Or well, not forever, but I mean, like that stopped being the case for a decade. And then we got edge rushers. We got the edge rusher label because it was no longer useful to separate these two things because everything kind of blended together. That's going back now because it comes back to the discovery. It all comes back to the discovery that was made, and the main lesson of the spread era that will stick is that passing is better. Passing is the be all end all. It's just what you do in service of passing and stopping the pass, for that matter. It's all reflected on the other side. And so when you look at defensive ends now, they're hugely important to your coverage unit because now that offenses have figured that out, that they need to be able to have those high volume passing games, and they need to be able to do it at the same time as they run it, because if they don't, then the defense can just play them 2 separate ways. Now you have to be able to defend condensed and spread formations without substituting. So you can't just say, all right, when they're in 11 personnel, we're going to get our small, fast D end out there because we aren't going to have these extra gaps on the line of scrimmage to deal with. So what happens when there's extra gaps, if you can, I mean, anybody listening to this, you could just pull up like an X's and O's chart or something, just to visualize it. When there are extra gaps on the line of scrimmage, if you have your defensive ends or whoever your edge defenders are on the perimeter of the line of scrimmage, the elements on the line of scrimmage, there are too many gaps inside that core for you to effectively defend. And so as a result, if those guys are outside, you need to bring second and third level defenders into those interior gaps to defend those interior gaps. So they need to come into the box. So if you want to keep those guys out of the box, what you need to be able to do is you need to have your edge defenders head up with or inside of tight ends, and allow those space defenders, those say your safety or your nickel, to take that perimeter. And if you want to keep them in space, they can't be coming down from 8 yards to fit the B gap, because that running back is headed right up it, and the first time you can hit him is at like 7 yards, and that's just not going to play, especially if maybe they have like a receiver inserting to block you too, and then it becomes hard to make the tackle, and then all of a sudden you have a huge gain because you've given up this amount of space. And that's where the running back element comes in too, because if that guy's really dangerous, the more dangerous a running back is, the more close to the line of scrimmage you need defenders just to congest, because you can't tackle him in space. But so the defensive ends now are going to need to be able to do that. So you can't have like if you go out there with, and a great example of this is if you watch the Texans against the Ravens on Christmas. The Ravens are the way that they are. They run their offense like a service academy. They are 2-3 tight ends. They are pulling linemen everywhere. They're condensed. There are extra gaps everywhere. And the Texans are the way that they are. They are small, fast penetrators up front, because it's D'Amico Ryans. And they would kick, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter outside of Charlie Kohler and Patrick Ricard on the line and give up these chasms inside. And these guys would all scream upfield into their one gaps. And they just, not only did they not have bodies in the box to deal with it when they tried to, play their too high base, which they do, they just got gashed. They got gashed. And when you look at the Cowboys, last year, but the year before, at the end of the year, when they lost to the Packers in the playoffs, when their run defense blew a total tire at the end of the year, because their starting three technique is 280 pounds, and their ace edge rusher is 245 pounds. Now DeMarcus Lawrence is good size, but they just didn't have a nose tackle. Like, their nose tackle was Mozzie Smith, who just isn't that good. So like, it doesn't, none of this fancy pass rush stuff matters if they are just going to bash you over the head for 300 yards. And all of a sudden, if you want to beat the Eagles in the playoffs, if you want to beat the Bills in the playoffs, if you want to beat the Ravens in the playoffs, if you want to beat the Chargers soon with what they're building, you can't be that vulnerable against the run.
Right. And so, not only is it kind of reshaping the way that you have to be built, right? Because there are those teams, like you said, like the Ravens, that's just what they're going to run, right? They're going to run it, and you're either built to stop it or you're not. And if you're not, you need to figure something out, or you're going to get embarrassed on national TV, right? But then there are other kind of versions of this developing in very RPO heavy offenses. And so, can you talk a little bit about kind of the advent of RPO in the NFL and why it is able to work in relation to kind of this topic that you're discussing here?
Yeah, the RPO really did change things for a little bit, and it changed college football. It hit college football like Beatlemania. It was crazy. What the RPO did to college offenses. I think in the NFL, this sort of comes back to what I was talking about with edge defenders reducing inside and allowing second and third level defenders, your support defenders, your nickels, and your safeties to stay out in space. That killed the RPO, like in the cradle, in the NFL. That and the fact that they actually enforce an eligible man downfield, unlike college football. If you watch like an Ole Miss game, like Lane Kiffin will have their center in the end zone. But like with the front first coverage construction of your defense, and keeping those guys out of interior gaps, what you allow your defense to do, is keep those guys in space, spill the ball to the perimeter, and then just have those guys rally late and tackle it. So the RPO, what was the stuff that was really shredding defenses in like 2018 and 19 and kept the spread era alive a little bit in the NFL, is just like is gonna die, is gonna die like fully when teams really get their shit together up front.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put you on the spot with one that I didn't prepare you for, and then I want to move into some tight end talk and some draft talk. Um, if you were a young offensive NFL coach, uh, what would be the thing that you would start leaning on heavy to try to break the system that's forming and the trends that are forming?
Well, duo. It's the most popular run play in the NFL right now. Basically, the idea is it's similar to inside zone in that it's just double teams and climbs on the inside. But what you do is you attach, whether it's 2 or 3 tight ends, a tight end, and 2 bunched receivers. You attach extra elements to the line of scrimmage to create these extra gaps at the point of attack. And the run, instead of going sort of more like inside zone, is, a lot of times B gap to backside A gap. Um, Obviously, outside zone's a similar path, just more pronounced. Um, Instead, it goes A gap to bounce. And so it hits way more directly. So you can't really spill and delay that because it hits so quick into those extra gaps. So in order to defend it, obviously winning up front defends everything, but in order structurally to defend it, you suddenly need to bring that safety down because these extra gaps are getting hit quick. So you're sort of you're recreating that situation in which a secondary defender has to defend an interior gap. Because you're creating more of those interior gaps, and you are able to block them there on the perimeter. And so those guys need to be there to defend that. And so that's why if you look at like Sean McVay, he switched his run game from inside zone based to duo based. Duo is it's everywhere. It's popular and successful, and this will go into the tight end conversation as well. But that's the first thing that I would lean into if I were building my team. I really would try to make sure that I have big physical guards. I need a tight end that can block the defensive end. I need it. You can't run the ball without it, especially now. I would have a slot receiver that is about 205, 210, and can dig out that nickel in tight consistently, like Puka Nacua does, like Drake London does, like Amon-Ra St. Brown does, and can play that sort of second tight end elements, fullbacky element, just whoever blocks the support defender. I want that guy because then I can have a robust pass game out of the same personnel grouping so that I can spread the defense thin again between my passing game and a condensed run game. So 11 personnel duo is still the rage right now. I would also really want a second tight end that is also big so that I can create real heavy elements as a changeup so that I can have 2 of those guys on the line of scrimmage and really bash your head in with a brick if your front is small so that I can put those ends into a lot of conflict between reducing and get like a 240-pound, well, there's no way it's 240, but like a 245, 250-pound wide 9, I would want head up on one of those big tight ends so I can just wash him down. And if he stays outside, then I can just run into those huge bubbles. And from there, I would build out a play action game. But as long as you run the ball from the same stuff that you drop back pass in, your drop back pass game can serve as a play action game as well. Even if you're not moving defenders, you're still passing into these static looks. So that's how I would build it. If you look at how the Lions built their team, it's perfect. It's perfect. And I don't want to say the Bills have too, but I don't want to use the Bills as a model because getting Josh Allen's the solution to a lot of problems. And it's not really replicable. You can find Jared Goff. And they're doing all this paying him money, by the way. So that's how I would build it. The 49ers as well.
So the part of the reason that I took 2 tight ends in my mock and is because of these conversations, like I said earlier, and I fear that I have now talked myself into a corner where like I so badly want to take two tight ends in this draft that if they don't, I'm going to be horribly, horribly disappointed. And not only that, but I have the two picked out. I want Warren and I want Evans.
Yeah.
Back to
Okay.
that in a second. I do want to hit on one thing that you said about needing physical guards in this offense. So this is a painful topic for Jet fans. I think a lot of people were unhappy to see Mekhi Becton succeed, where he was here for 4 years talking about, I'm a left tackle. I don't want to play on other position. Not only do I not want to play guard, but I don't want to swing out to the right. And then he goes to Philly and plays guard, and he has a pretty good season. He gets paid by San Diego, and gets a ring out of it, right? And so I think there's also a lot of talk among Jets fans about looking at tackles who can potentially slide into guard. Will Campbell is certainly one that people are concerned about the arm length. Maybe he can slide into guard. Chase Lunt is a guy from UConn that I had in my mock who his arms are just purely too short to play tackle.
I
He
love
can't,
Chase.
right? He's a big, nasty mauler. He's 6'5", all that, but he cannot play tackle in the NFL. And so do you think that's a trend we'll continue to see where we're looking at, hey, who are some college tackles that we can move on the inside and can be that big, nasty presence in the duo run game?
Yeah, I do, because